So hello, my name is Suzanne Aronowitz. I'm the Associate Dean for Law Career Services here at GGU, and I'm here to talk to our LLM and SJD students about working with Law Career Services, getting legal experience. I'll talk to you a little bit about an upcoming job fair that takes place in the winter for LLM students, and then we will spend some time today talking about job application materials. So there's a lot to cover. I will do my best to at least touch on everything so we have at least a good overview. And then to the extent that you need more detailed attention, you can certainly come and meet with me over at LCS. We're located on the 5th floor of the 40 Jesse building. We'll talk a little bit more about how to work with us. So I'll just get started. I did give out an agenda, and I'll try to follow that as best I can, just so you have a sense of where we are. And there's some good links on the agenda as well. So, getting legal experience. By virtue of you being in this room, that tells me that you are interested in getting some kind of legal experience during or after your program. And for those of you who are here on visas, there are certain implications for your visa in terms of timing, that sort of stuff. I'm not going to talk about any of that. John walked in right on cue. Any questions about how this fits in with your visa? Are you eligible? Are you not eligible? Go see John. He's your guy. You would work with me and with Law Career Services more on the mechanics of what are the opportunities and how do I access them. But you always want to circle back to him for the legalities and technicalities and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of different ways that law students can get legal experience working in some sort of legal setting. And they're called different things. You'll hear internship, law clerk, extern. These terms are used interchangeably. Sometimes they mean something very specific, but essentially they mean law students working under the supervision of attorneys in some sort of legal setting. These are student-directed opportunities, which means it's up to you as a student to find and acquire these opportunities. We don't have it's not a placement system where you come to me and you say, I want to do this kind of work, and I say, congratulations, here's your job. It doesn't work. Unfortunately, it does not work that way. So our job is to help you understand what's out there and help you understand how to access those opportunities and how to present yourself most effectively when you are interacting with the various legal employers. In terms of timing, typically one would apply for these kinds of positions a semester in advance. So if any of you are thinking about getting some kind of work experience in the spring semester, now is the time to reach out to those employers to inquire about those potential opportunities. If you are thinking about summer, now is not too early even to think about summer, at least for certain kinds of employers. And as we complete this semester, move into the beginning of next semester, we'll find that that becomes a very peak period for applying for those summer opportunities. If some of you are thinking more long-term, that you're in a situation where you actually want a full-time, long-term attorney position, the timing for those varies depending on the nature of the job. But for most of those jobs, one does not apply far in advance. One applies when one is ready to work because those employers hire when they have need. Now, there are some exceptions to that, namely the large law firms. They have their own scheme for hiring, and we can talk independent of this meeting if that's something that you are aspiring to work in. But for small and medium law firms, other kinds of organizations, you apply when you're ready to work, and that's when they're looking to hear from you. So there are lots of different kinds of employers, small and medium law firms, large law firms. There are government opportunities, and for students who are not U.S. citizens, it is still most government agencies will allow you to work there if you're a student and it's under the auspices of a student internship program. The rules change when you're seeking full-time paid employment, but it's not necessarily a barrier if you're not a U.S. citizen to get those opportunities. Same thing with judicial opportunities. Most of the courts in the area will have students working at the courts, working in chambers with judges, and that is an opportunity that would be available to you as a student. And we'll talk more about that. Many corporations have in-house legal departments, especially because we're here in San Francisco, that is also an opportunity that a lot of our students like to take advantage of, working in-house at a corporate office. And then certainly there are opportunities to work on campus as research assistants and teaching assistants. And, you may already know how to access those opportunities. We can talk a little bit more if that's something you're interested in. So one thing I would like to mention to all students, that in addition to a formal internship, which will require you to make a certain time commitment, I would say at least a 15-hour-a-week time commitment, but some employers are looking for full-time, so it's sort of anywhere in that range. For those of you who may not be in a position to make that kind of time commitment, or for those of you who want to start doing something right now, I would encourage you to consider our pro bono program. We have a pro bono program that is administered for us by one justice. And what pro bono is volunteer legal services that is done on behalf of folks in the community who cannot afford to pay for legal representation. And so we have a program where we will match students with different pro bono opportunities out in the community where you can go. Often it's just a short time commitment, maybe just going to a one-day immigration clinic and go and interview the clients, ask them questions, get information, share some resources and information, and maybe that's all you need to do. But it's a great way to start getting some legal experience. These pro bono clinics are staffed by attorneys, so it's a good way to build a relationship with an attorney. It's a way to interact with clients, and it doesn't require that same ongoing time commitment that an internship or a job would. And so that's something a lot of students have to fit right into their schedule as students. It also can be a great way to build some experience. So if you anticipate applying for a more formal internship or job, it gives you something to talk about on the interview with employers. And it shows them you've done some work here with U.S. attorneys, U.S. clients, and also it's a good thing to do. You all have specialized training, specialized knowledge, and so it is a good thing to be able to share that with members of our community who would benefit from it. So on the agenda, I put the link for our pro bono program. If you go to that website, you get more information about it, and you can sign up and get emails and learn more about how to connect with those opportunities. But I do recommend that. It's a great way to get involved. And for those of you who may have some fluency in other languages, you may find that puts you in high demand, that you have a lot to offer working with clients perhaps from the same country or part of the world where you're from, or having language, or being able to break down language barriers can be a tremendous resource and a great way to make yourself valuable within the community here in the area. So, working with us, LCS, Law Career Services, our job is to guide you through this process, to work with you to figure out what are the right opportunities for you, given your goals, given your interests. You can meet with us one-on-one. We can talk to you about all of these different things. So today I'm talking in very general terms because each one of you has different interests, different goals, different skills, different strengths, but career planning is going to be a more individual sort of experience. But you're welcome to come in for career counseling. We will work with you on how to present your credentials effectively. We'll talk a bit about that today. Barbara Green is also a tremendous resource in that area, as we'll talk a little bit about the process of how you would do that. We also have a website called LCS Online, and hopefully some of you already have accounts with LCS Online. That is our online system where we put all of our job listings, we put all of our handouts, we have evaluations that students have prepared after they've done different internships. We have access to our employer database. So it's a very good resource for you as you begin this process to identify what are the opportunities and how do I apply for them. So I've given you the link here. If you do not have an account for LCS Online, you can stop by our office or you can send us an email to lawcareer@ggu.edu. In that email, we will need to know your name. We'll need to know that, which program you're currently enrolled in. We'll need an email address, and we'll need your student ID number. And then if we have that information, we can establish an account and send you an email with a link that says, here's how you access the account, click here, here's your unique login information, and start using the website. I do recommend after you get into the website that you change the password, because what we're going to give you is some sort of generic password, and you should, of course, upgrade it to something that you will actually remember, and that is a little bit more secure than the generic password that we're sharing with you. In our office, we have a whole library of resources that you can take a look at. So for those of you who don't really know what kind of work you want to do, we have some good resources to identify different areas of law, different areas of practice, what is it that lawyers do in those areas, why did they choose that sort of work. So if you're still at that stage where you're trying to figure things out, we have some very good resources for you. If you know exactly what you want to do, we probably have some resources there too that you can take a look at, books and handouts and newsletters and magazines that might give you some more information or link you to contacts in those particular disciplines. So I do encourage you to come by the office, take a look at our collection of books and handouts and resources. Many of the books are available to be checked out. So if you have a student ID card, you can just check them out like you would any other library on campus. We communicate with students through law school news. So whenever we have events coming up, we have deadlines coming up, we will put an announcement in law school news. So please read that carefully. We also have a blog that we maintain that has articles, interesting things about the legal industry that we think students should know about, or job search advice, or information about upcoming events, or articles that maybe a student who just got a job will write a little profile of their experience. And I think people may have written for our blog at some point in time. And I encourage all of you, if you have one of those success stories, if you get an internship and there's an interesting story to tell, let us know. If you want to write a little article for a blog, we'll publish it. Or if you were nervous to go to a networking event and you went anyway and the people were nice and you walked away with some opportunities that you never would have had you not gone to that event, and you want to share that experience, we are happy to publish it on our blog, and then it's, you can put it on your LinkedIn profile or something to show folks that you've published something. So one of the things that is essential to success in this field is getting to know lawyers and building your base of contacts. Because the more lawyers you know, the more you will know about the different types of practice, the expectations that attorneys have when they are looking at students to evaluate them for different kinds of jobs and internships. It just will help you refine your own goals. It's important to get to know people in this community, and especially for those of you who are not from here, it's important to build those relationships because so many jobs are passed through word of mouth. There are a lot of employers who would be eager to hire a student, but they are not eager to post that position because they know if they put an advertisement out that says we want to hire a law student, they are going to get hundreds of applications, and they don't want to look at hundreds of applications. They want to call someone they trust to say, we're looking to hire a law student. Do you know anyone who's good? If so, tell them to write to me, so that maybe they hear from 2 or 3 students instead of hundreds. So it's really important for you to begin building those relationships with attorneys in the community so that you can hear about those opportunities. Certainly, you can start with your faculty right here, because that happens a lot, where attorneys will contact our faculty members, say, well, you teach at Golden Gate, you must know some good law students, send a few my way. So make sure our faculty knows who you are, knows your interests, knows your skills, so that they can share those opportunities with you. But you want to branch out into the communities where you want to practice so that those folks know you as well. And sort of that whole process of networking is something that we can assist you with at LCS. So you might come and meet with one of us one-on-one once we know more about your interests and kind of your personality, and whether you like to walk into a room of strangers or whether you like to just talk to people one-on-one, and we can brainstorm with you about what might be the most effective strategies for you to build those relationships with the people in the areas that you're most interested in. So rather than give you 30 networking tips today, I would say come to the other programs we do on networking and come meet with us. I will let you know on October 24th from 5 to 6:30 we are doing a program about networking. It's going to be held across the street at the DLA Piper Law Firm at 555 Mission Street. And we are bringing in an expert to talk to us about how to network effectively and how do we build relationships with strangers, and what do you do when you walk into a room of strangers, and how do you talk to them and engage with them and not feel so nervous, and what do you do after that meeting to build a relationship with those folks. So that would be a great event for all of you to attend. It's October 24th from 5 to 6:30. We are also inviting Golden Gate alumni and other folks in the community to join us. So it's a good way to practice and get some tips on how to do it. A few other resources in terms of building your contacts. Come to our programs. So throughout the semester, we will do panel discussions where we bring attorneys to campus. So for next week, for example, on the 9th, we are doing a panel discussion on careers in intellectual property law. So for those of you who have an interest in IP law, come to that program. We'll have 3 attorneys speaking. You might chat with them after the panel. You get a business card, follow up with them afterwards, let them know how much you enjoyed their presentation. Try to cultivate a relationship with those attorneys. We usually only invite friendly people to campus. We don't typically invite mean people who don't like law students to come to campus. So that's a very safe crowd to start meeting and getting to know. And you don't have to do it, you just come into a classroom and listen to them talk. So I would look for those opportunities whenever our office presents those, or other offices, student groups, faculty, when they're bringing attorneys to campus, make it a priority to go to those sessions. We would then coach you after you've maybe come to those sessions. We would encourage you to do informational interviews, and that's something you can coach on one-on-one. But that's essentially where you would set up a time to meet with an attorney and just chat with them about what they do and see what advice they have for you. And we find that many attorneys are very eager to share their experiences with students. So we can talk about that at a later date, or as you meet with us one-on-one. We do encourage you while you're here to get involved in the greater legal community. There are a lot of bar associations and professional organizations that are comprised mainly of lawyers. And these are great groups to get to know. They are very welcoming of law students. It's just a way to expand your network, expand your exposure. Some of them have pro bono opportunities. Most of them will hold presentations for students and for attorneys. Some of them even have mentor programs for law students. So those are a great resource for you to really get to know folks while you're here in this program and get to know folks in the greater area. We have a long list at LCS of all the different professional organizations in the area, and so you might want to come pick up a copy of that list and say, oh, there's an organization that focuses on the kind of work I'm most interested in, and you can reach out to them and see if you can join that organization. Those are a great resource for students, and often students don't take advantage of that opportunity. In fact, we had a presentation just yesterday from the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association, which is a group of mainly plaintiffs, civil litigators, and they are very welcoming to students. They want students to come to their events, and they really take their role as mentors quite seriously and do a lot of outreach to us to make sure students come to their events. So it's a great resource. When people want to help you out, you want to help them help you. So take advantage of that. So and then our alumni. We have a tremendous alumni base, and so you can access alumni through using the university's alumni directory. I've given you the link here, but we actually have a handout on LCS Online and in our office that gives you the passwords, so you can search the alumni directory. So if you'd like to find alums, whether LLM program, JD program, working here, working elsewhere, you can search through that to identify other alumni. I also encourage you, if you're on LinkedIn, to join the GGU Law LinkedIn group. And that's another great way to connect with GGU alumni. And I frankly find it a more useful tool because you get a lot more information about individual attorneys when you read their LinkedIn profile. And so I do encourage you to utilize that tool as well. Okay, I'd like to spend most of our time today talking about job application materials and sort of the mechanics of assembling the kinds of resumes and cover letters that legal employers are expecting to see from students. But before I transition, I just want to take a pause to see if there are any questions about some of the topics I sort of flew through.
Is there a particular person at the trial attorney, San Francisco trial attorneys that's especially good, or just pretty much everybody's doing
yeah,
good
I would just reach out to SF. If you have an interest in plaintiffs' work, I would just reach out to the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association, and they can give you all kinds of information about how to get involved. And in terms of working with our office, which is where I thought you were going to go with that question, John, there are 4 of us who serve in a career counseling role. I'm one of the 4. There are 3 others. We're all lawyers. We all tend to focus on different areas, so you are welcome to work with any or all of us. We have Jared, who focuses more on private sector employment and intellectual property and those areas. Lior is more focused on public interest and government opportunities. Jan and I are both more generalists. Jan used to be a corporate lawyer, so if you have interest in working in-house, she would be a great resource. And Jan has the added benefit of having lived overseas. In fact, she is in Europe as we speak. So she's lived in a variety of countries. She's worked in other countries. And so just from that sort of experience of having that international dimension, you may find working with Jan to be just kind of a nice personal experience. And then I am the generalist. I can talk to anyone about anything. So feel free to work with me. So, yes.
Are you helping students out with finding jobs within San Francisco, within California or other states as well?
We will help you wherever you want to look. Our resources are going to be best locally because so many of our students stay here, and that's where so many of our relationships are with employers. But the techniques that we use to find a job are the same regardless of the location. And we do have access to different resources for different locations, certainly in the US, and then some that are international as well. So we can at least, so we can coach you on the strategies, which would transcend location, and then we can point you to different resources based on the location where you're going. Okay, so let's chat about application materials, because this tends to be where we spend a lot of our time together. And what I'm planning to do today is give you an overview of the kinds of documents legal employers expect to see from you, and what do they expect in those documents. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the process of developing yours and the resources that we've developed between the LLM program and my office to help you pull together your materials. There are 2 handouts out here, one for resumes, one for cover letters. Please grab those if you haven't, or you can grab them on the way out. And so those will provide more detail and reinforce some of the concepts that I will be reviewing with you right now. So, Margaret, if you want to keep the video on the screen, because that'll be more helpful for our folks. So it's helpful when thinking about these materials to understand your audience. Right? When you're writing a brief to the court, you need to know that a judge is reading that, and you want to construct an argument for your audience. Well, the same is true when you are applying for a job. And often we forget about the employer, but they need to be the most important person in this process. And so it's important for all of us to remember what it is that employers are looking for when they look at your application materials. They're assessing 3 different things. They want to see, do you have the qualifications to do this job? Right? If you might need to loosen or just turn the whole tripod. Okay, so they're looking, can you do the job? And I think that is a little bit more of an extra challenge for our LLM students. Because most lawyers in the Bay Area have a JD. So they are familiar with the JD curriculum, they understand what it is, and even if they didn't attend Golden Gate, the JD curriculum is fairly standard school to school, so they have a sense of what an entry-level JD graduate can do. If we ran out, we have more copies at our office, and you can also get them on LCS Online, but feel free to stop by our office to get copies. So for LLM students, we find sometimes employers are not familiar with an LLM. They might be familiar with the tax LLM, but they may not be as familiar with U.S. legal studies or international legal studies. So that puts a little bit extra responsibility on you to show the employers what you know how to do, and that you've taken JD courses or JD equivalent, or that you've taken writing and research courses, or whatever it is that this employer might be most concerned about. I want you to take that initiative so that the employers see you have the exact qualifications that they're looking for. Employers are also looking to see if you're motivated, right? They want to know not just can you do the job, but will you do the job? We don't want to hire a lazy law student. We want to hire someone who is motivated and will do the work and will do it well, even if the work is not that interesting. Because often, as we all know, legal work is not always the most interesting. Sometimes you have to do some tedious work in addition to the more interesting stuff. So they want to see you have that motivation. And especially if you're not being paid for the work, this motivation becomes very important because they don't want to hire someone who says, well, it's a sunny day out, I'm only a volunteer anyway, I'm not going to show up for my internship, I'd rather go to the beach, right? They don't want to hire that student. They want the motivated student. And they're also looking to assess fit. If they're going to have you in their office and on their team, are they going to like you? Are you going to get along with the people in the office? Will you relate well to their clients? Do you share the same values of their organization? And those are kind of intangible things, but it's important. And, you know, who would want to spend their days with someone who isn't a good fit? You, I would imagine, are also assessing them to see, is this a place where I can learn, and will these people mentor me, and you know, are they pleasant, or are they going to yell at me, and you know, so you also are assessing, is this a good fit in this situation? Okay, now legal employers do not expect that law students have a whole lot of legal experience, and so I often put this up here for first-year law students who, by definition, have no legal experience. And the same is true for you. If you have a lot of legal experience, great. We want you to leverage that and market that and present that. But if you don't have a lot of legal experience, or if it's in a different area of the law, you shouldn't let that hold you back. You just have to figure out how to present what you do have so employers can assess your credentials. So there are two different kinds of documents we're talking about today, and I want to be really clear with you about the unique purposes each of those documents serve, because they do different things. So we'll talk first about the resume, which is similar to a CV, but a little bit different. And so the job of the resume is to communicate to employers what have you done. Okay? It is looking backwards in time, and it's looking at your educational experience, your work experience, maybe some unique skills that you've developed, but it's kind of a factual kind of thing, and it's providing things that bring you to this point in time. So this is where an employer can assess, do you have the qualifications for the job that they're evaluating you for? Okay. The cover letter, on the other hand, answers the question, why should we hire you? It actually answers, why are you even applying for this opportunity? Why should this employer select you instead of the other 25 people in this room? And so it's a conversation. It's not just simply me, which is the resume. The cover letter, it's talking to the employer. Why are you writing to this organization? What connection do you have to the work that they do and to the clients that they serve? You want to help them almost visualize a future of the two of you together. So whereas the resume looks past, the cover letter can sort of paint a picture of the future, where you're going with your legal career, why you're applying for this organization. And here you have the opportunity to address not just your qualifications, but also your motivation to work hard and your fit. Okay? So it's a very, you can use these documents very strategically, but it's helpful to understand what their jobs are. So I'm going to focus first on resumes. We'll talk about that first because that seems to be what we all go to when we're preparing our documents. And then after we talk a bit about resumes, we'll talk about cover letters. So when you're preparing your resume, do not use a word processing template. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, oh, I'm not familiar with the format of American resumes, and look on my Microsoft Word, they have a little wizard that shows me how to do a resume. I am telling you, do not use it. The wizard is terrible. Sorry, Bill Gates, it is a terrible wizard. You don't need to know very complicated formatting. In our materials, we've given you a sense of what it should look like, and so I would just not use any of those templates. And I do not want you to include any of these items either. So sometimes you see on US resumes in more of a business context, people will list an objective at the top or a summary at the top. We don't see that in legal resumes.
And why is that?
Because, okay, so we don't include the objective because either some people will construct something that is so narrow and precise that any other employer who gets a resume with that same objective on it is going to say, well, they don't want to work for me because they want to do this very narrow, precise thing, and we don't do that. Or it is so broad as to say, I would like to gain legal experience, that it's too broad and it's not very compelling, and the employer, it just takes up space. So we use the cover letter to speak directly to the employer about your interests and your objectives. So you don't need to take up space on the resume. We typically start with a bachelor's degree, and then anything since the bachelor's degree. If you had work experience while earning your bachelor's degree, that's fine to include. And then we want to be careful about industry jargon. If you happen to have worked in a field, let's say engineering or sales or some other field where there's a lot of lingo, a lot of jargon within your industry that might have been appropriate if you were applying for another job in that industry, I'd be careful because lawyers will not understand what you're talking about. And this may be true too if, in terms of different legal structures. If most of your work experience is from a different country, you might want to be careful about that as well to make sure we sort of translate terms so that the audience here can understand them. Margaret.
I was just going to say, do not include personal information too, whether you're married, single, the date of your birth.
Don't include a picture.
How tall you are.
Right. No picture, no social security number, birth
Right.
date, age, marital status, health status. Do not include that on your application documents. U.S. employers are not permitted to consider that information in the hiring process. And so they don't want it because first of all, it makes you look out of step if you include it because other folks seeking jobs here are not including that information. But also they don't want to be accused of not hiring you because of one of those pieces of personal information because they're not allowed to consider that in the process at all. And they don't want to be accused of discriminating against you on some sort of protected basis. So, yeah, none of that stuff goes on here. Now, if you happen to reveal, let's say you are a member of the Women's Law Association here at Golden Gate, and so we would want you to list that. Well, that might perhaps communicate your gender to the employer. Well, that's fine. I mean, it's not a secret, but you don't want to just gratuitously list all of that information. Okay. We also do not use pronouns, personal pronouns on the resume. So you don't use I, me, or my. You will be the subject of every sentence on your resume. So I kind of think of it as like a silent I at the beginning of every sentence. I'll show you the sentence structure. It's a little awkward at first, but just don't use I, me, or mine. Okay, so here's what you should do with your resume. Generally speaking, we want to keep it to a one-page document. Now, this is not always going to be possible depending on your experience, but as a general rule, that's what we start from. Now, if you are considering opportunities in the patent law field and you have a background in science and engineering, we want you to have a longer resume, more of a CV where you're listing all of your lab work, all of your research work. In that area, the employers do want that kind of detail. Also, if you're applying for public interest opportunities and you have a long history of community service and volunteerism, and it might be important to communicate some of those activities to those employers. But as a general rule of thumb, we typically see a one-page resume. If you are struggling to get your 3-page CV into a 1-page resume, work with Margaret, work with us, and we can help you make some choices and figure out how best to present that information.
You should come to me first.
Yeah.
And I will do some cleanup work. I'll just go ahead and do it for you, and then take it to Career Services, and they will make it perfect. So.
Right. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
so exactly. So, I'm going to review kind of the basics today. You have the handouts. Your first stop will be to work with Margaret. She'll do her best to work with you to take you to whatever point as possible, and then you would come in and work with us to really polish up your documents and make sure everything's just right.
How long does that take, or from a planning perspective, how long should people, be prepared? A
I
week, a
usually
month?
turn them around in a few days,
few
usually
days.
a week at the most.
Yeah, but you should be prepared that it goes back and forth. It's not, what in my experience, it's not like I get a resume, it's perfect, you move on to the next step. If you might give it to me, I make some adjustment, or I make some suggestions. You go back, you make some adjustments, you bring it back to me. I say, okay, these are good, but let's also focus here, or, there is some back and forth. It's not a one-stop transaction. So you should plan for that time. It is essential on all of your job application documents that you list your credentials accurately, precisely. There can be no mistakes at all. Legal employers, first of all, they don't want to see any mistakes in terms of grammar and spelling and punctuation and all of that, but they also do not want to see any mistakes in your credentials, because they might think that you are trying to misrepresent yourself. And that can get you into all kinds of trouble here at the law school. If you are planning to sit for a bar exam, that will get you into all kinds of trouble. So even if it was an innocent mistake, if you're misrepresenting your GPA, your class rank, when and where you earned a degree, and any of those sorts of things, you can get into a lot of trouble. So take the time, be very thorough, be very careful, proofread things many, many times to make sure all of your credentials are listed with precision and they're all accurate. And then we want to be consistent. So employers, especially legal employers, care about the way the document looks, and they care about grammar, and they care about margins, and they care about spelling and abbreviations, and so everything just has to be perfect. You want to be consistent throughout. If things are not consistent, if there are weird glitches, they will see it. It bothers lawyers, and they will just pass you by until they find application materials that are a little bit easier for them to read. There is also a sense that, the resume is a one-page document. If you cannot put the kind of care into a one-page document to get that error-free, they are going to have concerns about your ability to produce a 20-page brief and have that 20-page brief be error-free. So they really want you to model that behavior in these documents. Okay, so proofread. Okay, so what I want to do, let me see if I can do this. I'm just going to show you a picture of a resume, so you have a sense of how it's laid out. And there are lots of different formats. There's one or a couple actually in the handout. And the ones in the handouts, you can kind of pick and choose, look at the different fonts, look at the different styles. But I just want to highlight a few different elements. Okay, so at the top of the document, you want your name, you want your contact information. So by that, we want a mailing address, email address, and phone number. You want to be careful with your email address, that it should be something that identifies you. So her name is Corey Student and her email address is Corey Student. You don't want her, sexy law guy or something. You want something like that is both. I mean, we've seen it. I've seen stuff like that where it shows poor judgment, but also how will the attorney link you with that identity? Right? They're getting all these emails from law students. We want it to be really clear. S. Aronowitz is Suzanne Aronowitz. Okay? We typically list education first, and I would recommend that for all of you, especially if most of your professional experience is out of the United States, because they may be confused otherwise as to why you're applying for these jobs. So you start with Golden Gate, and you work backwards in time. So for you, it would say Golden Gate University School of Law. On the next line, it would say LLM US Legal Studies, or LLM International Legal Studies, or whatever program you were in, candidate, comma, and then the month and year when you expect to earn your degree. Underneath that, you can include other information. This is all optional, so all of this stuff here, the honors and activities, this is optional, but if you have earned these kinds of honors, put them on your resume. If you are involved in student organizations, if you hold leadership roles, put it on your resume. These are things employers like to see because they show motivation, they show leadership, they show a commitment to excellence. So these are good things. Employers like to see them. Then you would skip a line, and then you would put your prior degrees. Notice here how we set this up. It's like things line up nicely. There's a margin here, then we have a tab here, so these all line up. Then there's another tab here, so these line up. Like it's just very clean and crisp, and it guides the reader's eye. So instead of using the space bar to move things in, just use tabs, because it looks much crisper, and the formatting holds itself a little bit better. We scroll down. So now for the work experience section, you can include in the work experience section any jobs you've held, internships. You know, it could be volunteer experience as long as it's been significant. If it was a 1 day, 1 time, 2 hour, that's it. I probably would not put it in this section unless you have nothing else to put here. Okay? In that case, we use what we've got. But if you had other things, this would be things that are more substantial. But it could be volunteer. And so you'll see we list the organization, and on the same line as the organization, we put the location, under that your job title, on the same line as that we put dates. I prefer using month and year spelled out rather than abbreviations. It just looks nicer, it doesn't look sloppy. And then then we have a little description. So in your description, you want to start every single sentence of that description with a verb. And that verb should be communicating a skill. You want to use as many different verbs throughout your document as you can to show that you have lots of different skills. If you just keep saying research, 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 it's kind of boring. It looks like that's the only thing you know how to do. So you want to use, so you see here, it says represented, researched, conducted, drafted, devised, initiated. All of those verbs show a certain amount of activity, that this person is using their own thinking process, they're directing their own work, and it's communicating different skills that the person has. In the sentences, you also want to use legal vocabulary. So if you've drafted certain kinds of legal documents, you might indicate those. If you've worked with certain kinds of practice areas, you might list that in here as well. So that in each sentence, you might have a verb that shows your skill, something about a legal proceeding or document you might be familiar with, and maybe the subject area, and build those together. We don't want super short sentences, but we don't want long runs either.
And not bullets, not bullets.
You can use bullets. So this is I don't have an opinion as to which is better. It's really a space issue. So if you're one of those people who has a 3-page CV and you're trying to squish it down to a 1-page resume, you will find that paragraphs are a much more efficient format. You can get a lot more information on the page. On the other hand, if you are the sort of person who has never worked, has barely gone to school, is brand new at all of this, and you are worried you can't even fill 1 page, you will find that bullets are going to be your friend because it stretches the text down the page vertically. It's less efficient in how the space is used. And so often for me, that's what it boils down to. It's just
my question is kind of like what's like on the internet side, the bullet list easier to scan, quick. So does that come over in terms of making it easier for employers to scan, not so much because they see so much?
Right, but if having the bullet list sends your resume onto multiple pages, then maybe not.
Yeah.
So one thing I would have done had this resume come to me, see here I have 2 words on this whole line. If I were advising this student, I would say, go back and edit this sentence. Probably the student could take, edit this a little better to get rid of 2 words, and then you wouldn't have used an entire line for 2 words. So it was like for little tricks like that.
I guess this is something that I'm still struggling with, just from my point of view. As SJD students, we can research anything now, and I guess I'm worried by saying I researched X, Y, and Z, that it's only they're going to say, oh, well, she never did this, I don't want to hire her now.
Right.
Whereas it doesn't matter. I mean, I think we can do anything. We can research anything at this point.
And I think that may be more of a one-on-one conversation.
Oh, okay.
Because one thing I talked to students, you have all done lots of different things. And so I talked to a student yesterday who had a lot of experience in environmental law. She's had some experience in criminal law. She was applying for a criminal law job. So we talk about maybe taking the environmental jobs and taking out some of the jargon around environmental and highlighting the criminal stuff, because otherwise the employers were going to get confused about her true motivation. So just because you can and have done lots of different things, you don't necessarily have to include all of it here if it will confuse employers. So those are strategic conversations that we can have. And you might even have 2 or 3 different versions of your resume, which is what I told that student. So maybe she has her environmental resume, and then she has her criminal law resume, and she might highlight different elements of her background for those different kinds of employers. So let me move on, because I still want to talk about cover letters, and that tends to be the thing that people have more questions about.
Just the font question,
Yeah,
sans
yeah.
serif and all of that in terms of a clean, readable
Yeah, and,
document.
in terms of font, again, I'm not particularly picky. There's so much about the resume that is already structured that sometimes people feel like this is how I can express myself. I picked this font or that font, so that's fine as long as it's clean, easy to read. I don't really care.
Doesn't
You just
make-
want to be consistent
Yeah.
throughout the document, not lots of different type styles and sizes and bold and italics and underline and caps and it's too much. So you just want it simple and clean. So just
What do you
yes.
think about including hobbies?
Hobbies. Okay, so I wouldn't call them hobbies. I might call them interests. So if they're interesting, I would include interests. If they're not, I probably wouldn't. So if you are a marathon runner or do something that shows endurance, shows great accomplishment, I'd put that on. If you like to read books, I probably would not put that on, because most lawyers like to read. It doesn't tell them anything unique, and it tells them you like to sit by yourself. It's not a way to show how you're going to be on the team. So, you also need to be prepared. If you do say I like to read books, that maybe, if there's a particular genre of fiction that you are an expert in, certainly list that, but then be prepared to talk about it. So if you just say I like 19th century English literature, well then be prepared on an interview. Someone's going to ask you a question about that. What's your favorite book? Who's your favorite author? What have you read lately? It's fair game. Once you put it on there, it's fair game. But if it's a way to make a connection or start a conversation, or you've achieved some success in a different discipline, sure, it's good to come on. Okay, just some final tips here. So use different verbs. We talked about that. Try to avoid weak words like assisted, which doesn't tell us anything about what you did. It tells us what the other person did. So use more descriptive verbs. Pay attention to page breaks. You don't want to break in the middle of a section. So if you have a job, you don't want to cut it in half.
Even if that forced it onto a second page, it'd be better
Right.
to avoid.
Yeah, and just play with the formatting so that it kind of fits on the page nicely. When your resume is done, finished, done, Margaret's looked at it, I've looked at it, Margaret's looked at it, I've looked at it, you've looked at it, everyone's looked at it, it's perfect, there are no typos, we love it, it's done, convert it to a PDF before sending it to employers, so that the formatting is preserved and that they'll be able to open it. They see it the way you intended to see it. Okay, I do want to move on to cover letters because we tend to struggle more with cover letters. So a cover letter is a letter that covers your resume. That's why it's called a cover letter. So you always use a cover letter when you are submitting a resume, unless they specifically tell you not to. Or if you're applying for something where they require you to write a personal statement or an essay, in that case you might not need a cover letter. But otherwise you should assume a cover letter is required. Most employers will not ask for the cover letter, but it is a big mistake if you don't include it. Okay? And especially in your case where maybe your background or your credentials are not as familiar to legal employers. You're really losing out on an opportunity to tell them what you have to offer. Okay? So in the cover letter, it's identifying the position you're applying for, tells them when you're available, it explains, why, maybe explains your prior experience in a way that they can understand it, it highlights your skills. This also demonstrates your writing experience, your writing ability. And for those of you who didn't get their JD here or are from other countries, that is an issue for legal employers. They are worried. How good is your command of the English language? Can you present yourself in writing effectively? And so they're looking at this one-page letter as a writing sample. Can you write an effective letter? Well, if so, then they're more interested in talking to you. If not, they're going to have serious concerns about your ability to do more significant writing in their office. So it's really important, I think, a great opportunity for you to showcase your abilities in this letter. Okay, so here are the do's and don'ts. Okay, the cover letter should be 1 page. It should be formatted in a way that's consistent with the resume. So use the same font, use the same letterhead across the top of the page. Your cover letter should be tailored to each employer. This is not a generic document. The resume could be generic, cover letter is not generic. Proofread for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Okay, some things to avoid, use a generic letter. You always need to address your letter to a human. Okay, do not do to whom it may concern, dear sir or madam. This stuff will get your application thrown in the garbage. If you're applying for a position and they don't identify who the contact person is, you can do some due diligence, call the organization, you could check in with us, you could do some research on the organization's website. Often you can find that information. If after doing all of that you can't, then there might be better generic phrases and we can coach you on that depending on the nature of the organization. Either dear hiring partner, dear hiring attorney, dear recruiting manager, you know, different organizations have different hiring structures and so we can coach you on that. Okay, your information has to be presented differently in the cover letter than on the resume, and I'll show you in a minute by what I mean. But you also want to avoid simply telling employers what they already know about themselves. Sometimes I'll see students do that. They'll just copy something from the firm's website and paste it in their letter, like an entire sentence. You are the 3rd largest law firm in Sacramento. Like, they know that, so don't tell them that. Now, if you are attracted to them because of some quality they have, that would be important, because maybe it's a way to show your interest or background that relates to that. But I wouldn't just have a sentence exclusively about them. And don't make your sentences overly complicated. You know, plain English. We just want plain, simple, clear English. Okay, so let me, here's a format, kind of a structure that we recommend for the cover letters. And we mentioned this in the handout, so you don't have to take tons of notes, it's in there. It's a 4-paragraph structure. In the first paragraph, it's short and simple. You're simply identifying the position you're seeking, when you're available to work. If you are in a position to volunteer, you might mention that there. And I think for those of you where everything else on your resume is from another country, you might indicate here that you are authorized to work in the United States, either through your visa or some, you might make some mention of it. And would that be the phrase?
Yeah, eligible to work in the United States.
Yeah.
If you need more information than that, then through the practical training program at Golden Gate University. But that line is usually more than adequate. Eligible to work in the United States. Period.
Right, because you can imagine employers looking at it to say, oh my gosh, why would I hire? Oh, I have to hire an immigration lawyer just to hire an intern. I don't want to go through all that trouble. So just having that simple phrase will get them to continue reading your application.
Because oftentimes at the initial screening, what they're looking at is is the employer willing to sponsor workers in the U.S. And so oftentimes they'll put that out there right out front, yes or no, or not sponsoring at this time. And so again, if you can just put one line in there, eligible to work in the U.S., that directly addresses the issue.
But only say that if you are, right? I mean, don't say earlier if you're not.
Correct.
Okay, second paragraph. This is where we get into more substance. And the focus of the second paragraph is explaining why are you writing to this organization? What is it about them that you find so compelling? What in your background might they be interested in? Do you have knowledge of the work that they do? Have you worked with your client population before? Have you studied things in school that give you expertise in the discipline that they're involved with? But just, I mean, this is where you can really get to that motivation question and to some degree the fit question. And so, might be a way to showcase experience you developed in other places, even if it's not legal, but it's a way to highlight things that might be related and might actually make you more interesting because you have this other experience instead of the same thing everybody else has. Okay? We might talk about geography too. So if all your background is in one location and now you're, if you have no experience in the Bay Area and you're suddenly looking here, you might address that. Or if you're looking in some other location, you might address that because they might see you're currently living in the Bay Area. So why is it that you're applying for this position in New York or DC or Rome or wherever it is? And so you want want to identify what your connection to that community is. Okay, the third paragraph, this is where you talk about your skills. And this is where you show them you can do the job. It's really important if you're responding to a job announcement to look at what the employer is looking for. Look at what the duties are of that job or what qualifications they are seeking. Circle those words, and that's what you use to organize this paragraph. So if you know that this employer is looking for students with really strong research skills, really strong analytical skills, and the ability to talk to clients, then that's what you focus this paragraph on. Okay, you guys all do lots of things, you have lots of experience, and you're excellent at all of it. You can't tell them all those things in one paragraph. So you really focus on what it is that they're looking for. And so you organize the paragraph around those skills. So you might start with a topic sentence that's, through my professional and academic experience, I have developed skills that would enable me to serve you and your clients. In particular, I've just developed strong research skills through my experience on blah, 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 where I blah, 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 blah. You know, you sort of pull in your background as evidence to show them you actually have the skill you're claiming to have. Okay, so you just use your prior experience as evidence. And then you say, in addition, I've developed strong writing skills through, working here where I drafted briefs and motions and discovery. And finally, I've had experience working with clients and establishing rapport when I staffed that pro bono clinic at such and such, or I interviewed 30 clients in 2 hours and
How important are the numbers?
The numbers I think are less important here. I mean, in business, numbers are big. They want to see how many. I think the legal employers are a little bit less concerned, more concerned about the quality and the substance of it. If the numbers can somehow communicate that, then that's great, but I wouldn't be a slave to the numbers.
Yeah.
But so this helps you present information on your resume, but in a different way. And it might even get them to focus on certain things on your resume that they would have glossed over initially because they didn't understand the connection. And so by highlighting it here, they see it a little bit better. Yes?
What is verbatim?
I'm sorry? Oh,
Verbatim.
verbatim, sorry. So it just means exact like a copy of your resume. So some cover letters, I read them say, first most recently I worked here and this is what I did. And before that I worked there. Before that I worked there. Well, that's what your resume says. It's boring. Okay, so final paragraph, short and sweet. Thank you for your consideration. And then you want to make it clear whose turn is it to act next. So if you're replying to an ad, a job listing, a job fair, it's the employer's responsibility to follow up with you. But if you have reached out to an organization, you have no idea if they're hiring, but maybe a colleague said, oh, you should consider such and such organization, so you're just writing to them, you should take responsibility for doing the follow-up work. I will contact you to see if there are any opportunities available. Something along those lines. Okay, so a couple final tips. This is not your opportunity to tell them you have no experience and you don't know what you want to do. Okay? You might tell me that, but do not tell these employers that. They don't want to hear it. You want to use topic sentences for each paragraph to guide them through the letter. You want to be very specific with some of those examples, as I mentioned earlier. Make sure your sentence structure is good. Don't use passive voice. You want to be well written. Proofread it. Please, 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 please proofread it. So I just want to, there's some examples in there, or at least more of a format of a letter. Oh yeah, you're over time. So let me just mention 3 other documents that you will need to prepare for some employers. Okay, every employer wants a resume and a cover letter. Some employers might want a reference list, a transcript, or a writing sample. So I just want to give you a couple tips. Reference list is a list with 3 to 5 different professional or academic references who can vouch for you. You want to ask these folks if they're willing to be on this list before you take the liberty of putting their name there. Is there a class in here? And so you want to make sure they're okay with that. And you would just provide their name, their organization, email, address, or whatever. Good. Okay. So put that there. They don't want personal references. So it isn't just someone who's, oh, she's nice, we're friends. You know, they want someone who's supervised your work. You can talk about your work ethic, you can talk about your skill set. And it would look something like this, where you'd have your letterhead on the top and then just the 3 to 5 references. I'm not worried if your references are overseas, especially if you have an email address. I don't think it's a barrier the way that it used to be. And so if that's where your references are, that's where your references
Is more inherently better, or is the 5 always gonna be better than 3, or quality?
It could be, especially if it might be hard to track your references down. I think more than 5 is overkill.
Yeah.
But if you're concerned that 1 or 2 of your folks might be hard to reach, then I would have a couple extras.
Oh, I had a question about the writing sample.
Oh, okay, so writing samples, legal employers want to see your legal writing. So if you are taking a legal writing class here, that would be the ideal document to present to an employer. Really make sure it's perfect. If your instructor is giving you feedback, you can go back and edit your document incorporating that feedback. But again, pay attention to the structure, to the analysis, to the citation format. It all counts. Yes.
So going back to the environmental criminal law person, and if she didn't have any sample for criminal law, did she come up and create a writing sample to show them?
You could. So if you have several samples to choose from, choose one that you think the employer is most interested in. But if you don't have a choice, you got to go with what you have, because the application's due tomorrow. And, you know. So if you have nothing, then you want to start thinking about creating one, and that may be something you can talk with your professors about, or maybe do a little research project. It doesn't have to be long, maybe 5 pages, but just, you know, so maybe you ask for, I'd like to do a research project on this topic, it's interesting to me, can you suggest a topic, and maybe write a memo or brief or something, and we can talk more about that, but you should expect employers are going to want to see this from you, and so the more you can plan for it, the better. Okay, and then employers will want to see a transcript. They will certainly want to see your grades here. They will likely want to see your grades from your undergraduate, you know, a JD, or if you have an LLB, they'll want to see those grades. We have a template on our LCS online system that's a Word document that I would recommend you use, because it's hard to scan in official transcripts. Those are hard to use, so you might want to just create a document that resembles an official transcript, and that is usually sufficient. Just make sure you get it perfect, because any mistake on that transcript, bad news, as I mentioned earlier. And so this is the template that we have, and so you see you can just plug in your grades, and it looks like a transcript. Okay, so here are the steps to perfect materials. Attend the workshop, here you are, so you've already done step 1. Step 2 is reviewing the handouts I've given you, and they are also available on LCS Online if you didn't get them. Step 3, meet with Margaret, and she will get you started, get you oriented, at least get you kind of moving in the right direction. And then once Margaret gives you the go-ahead, come and meet with us. We'll get your materials and take you to the next step. Okay, just a word, sorry to hold you guys late. I just want to make sure you know about the West Coast LLM Job Fair. It is taking place in February in Los Angeles on the campus of UCLA. It is a job fair. There are about 15 schools that participate. We are one of those schools. And I've given you a handout that has all kinds of information. So, a couple things, a couple deadlines. On November 5th, registration for this job fair will begin. So it's a 2-step process. So in November, you need to go to this website, you need to create an account, and then I think I go in and approve, say, yes, this person is in fact a GGU student. So that's what happens between November 5th and December 3rd. Don't wait till December 3rd, since I have to go in and make sure you're a student. There's a little, you want to insert a little cushion of time there. Then from December 4th to January 3rd, you go back into the system, and you can start looking at the employers who are participating, look at the jobs that they're offering, the qualifications that they're seeking, and you can decide which ones you want to apply to. And we call that application process bidding. So that's why I said bids. I didn't make up that word. And so you actually upload your application materials for each of the employers you want to apply to through this job fair. These opportunities are all around the world. Some are here in California, some are overseas, some are in New York. It's kind of a whole variety of opportunities. But it's in that 1 month. So from early December to early January is when you actually upload your applications. After that, the system closes. They send the applications to employers. Employers will make selections. The folks at UCLA will create the interview schedule, and you will find out if you've been selected and what time your interviews are. So since this job fair is down at UCLA, what I would say is apply. See if it register, see who's participating. If the jobs don't interest you, then at that point don't continue applying. If the jobs do interest you, apply, work with us to get your materials perfect. And you typically will get some advance notice, a couple weeks notice of whether you've been selected for interviews. And at that point you can decide, okay, do you want to pay for a plane ticket or drive down to LA with a couple of friends, or kind of, because I know the expense of travel to LA is a concern for some folks, but you'll have some notice, and that's something we can plan for as we get a little bit closer. But I do encourage you to take a look and see if it's something interesting to you, since these employers are specifically seeking international LLM students.
Do you know whether the jobs on the employer side all pop up initially, like in December, or do they kind of like trickle in?
Ideally, they all pop up initially, but if an employer came to UCLA 2 weeks after that period to say, we want to hire students, I'm sure we would.
There's more.
So you want to keep checking, because
Yeah.
there may be new employers. That's it, that's our contact info. So I apologize for running late. I will stick around for another minute or two if you have questions, but I imagine some of you have a class to get to. So thank you for coming.